In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we take all of our work out of Substance Painter, export all of our maps, and pull all that work into UE4. So I've got a UE4 scene loaded up, a default new scene. Let me just show you this. If we go to File, New Level, you can follow along with this. I'll just use the default level here. And this is what we've got kind of coming into there. Now, the only thing I want to do is get rid of this checkered board kind of pattern that we've got on here. So I've got a floor kind of material that I kind of threw together that's just kind of this gray material. So I'll at least be doing that. And the other thing I want to do is under content, I'll go ahead and make a new folder. And I'll call this Canon like this. And then within the folder structure, I'd like to make another new folder, call this meshes. If I could type meshes like this. And let's go ahead and make another folder, and let's call this materials, and another one, and call this textures, like that. Okay, so we've got everything that we need for this. I'm going back to Maya. I want to make sure that I'm using the same exact mesh that I used inside of Substance Painter. So I'm going to export that out. So I'll do File, Export Selection, make sure I'm on FBX Export. And if we look at the presets, I don't need animation turned on. It doesn't have any animation, so it doesn't really matter for that, but these are the options you want to make sure that you have for that. So I can turn that off. I'll go ahead and close this and export selection. And then I want to throw this into the FBX kind of area, right? So I've got this thing already saved out. I can call this Canon GameRes.fbx. Let's write over the top of that one. Let's go to UE4. We're going to go ahead and pull that in. Let's go to the meshes area and right click and say import. And then let's go navigate to that particular section. And so let me go ahead and find this on my computer here. So here's where I am, 3D, week 8, tools and resources, FBX right here. So this is where I stored my Canon. And the import options for this, if I can grab this real quick, I'm not going to import the materials or textures. I'm just going to go ahead and import the mesh directly in. So I'll go ahead and click and drag this out into the world. We can double click on this and just kind of check it out. And I'll tap F, hold down Alt and click and drag. Hold down L and I can move my light source around by holding down L and clicking and dragging. But everything I think looks pretty good. If we turn on collision, you can see that there's the use complex collision is simple in the blue, and then this is the auto-generated collision there. So I think everything should work okay for the collision on this thing. I'll go ahead and just save this. So our mesh is ready to go, and we can take this thing, maybe rotate it 90 degrees or so, something like that. Have it in the world. Okay, so mesh is ready to go. Let's go back on over to Substance Painter, and here we'll export out the maps. So basically, if we tap C, we can view the different channels that we're going to be exporting out. So we've got color. We're not going to export out height. We will be exporting out roughness, the metallic, the normal information on this. Let's get in a little closer on this. Tap C. Here's the normal plus height. So this is the information that we painted in additionally to that. And back to the base color. If we tap M, we can go back to our entire material like this. So that's what we're going to be exporting out. So to export the textures out, we're going to say File, Export Textures like this. And it's going to ask you what size do you want to export it out as right here. And if you've got multiple sets on there for exporting out textures, it would show up in this area. We've only got this one that you see here. So we've got a configuration within here. So let's go ahead and look at that. There's different types of ways that you can export things out. There is one for Unreal Engine for packed, and what I would do with this is alter this thing. So let's talk about that real quick. If you go over to configuration, you can see that this is everything that this is going to spit out with this particular configuration that they've got. So this is the Unreal Engine uh, packed right here like this, and you can see it'll spit out it'll take the mesh name and then the texture set name, and it'll put an underscore base color. Now if we want to tweak any of this stuff, we could do that, right? This one is using an RGB together with an A, so you can pack an RGB map with alpha. This is a separate red, green, and blue channel for occlusion, roughness, and metallic. And then this one is a normal map, which is just RGB together. And then this one is emissive, is if it's RGB together as well. So you can take these presets and you can make new presets, and this is basically what I put together for what I want. I want this thing to be called, it could be called the texture set underscore color. Now we could steal this information. Right now the texture set is called, for mine, default material, because I didn't name that in Maya and didn't pay very much attention to that. Now if I want a specific name to come out of there, maybe from the mesh name, I could do something like this. I could go back over to this one, and you can see within here this this $ mesh underscore. If I steal that and hit Control C and copy that and go to this custom pack, I could replace this texture set name with that mesh name. So you're able to kind of do a little bit of kind of scripting in this area to kind of give it the naming convention that you're wanting. So you know, if I wanted this thing to be instead of color, something shorter like COL for color, like this, and then norm or something like that, I could change the name of this. And then we can keep this metal. I'm packing together the metallic and specular, which we're not really using in roughness, and this other thing I'm just using emissive as a mask, AO, and then curvature, all put together in one kind of thing like this. And so you can see with this setup, you can click and drag out the different things that you want. So for like color, if we find the diffuse, you could take the diffuse or base color and click, and you can drag it into this particular area, and you can tell it what channel do you want: the red channel, green channel, blue channel, the alpha channel, or the RGB channels together. So that one would be RGB channels together. And what was pulled out for here for metal, spec, and roughness is if you go to metallic and you click and you drag this out, like you drag it here onto there, and you say from the gray channel of the metallic, you can basically kind of build these combinations together for how you want to have this thing exported out. So after this is all kind of set up the way that you're looking for, you can go over to export. This dilation is, it's going to be the pixel bleed out past the UV borders. Here's where you can set up what kind of maps that you're going to be exporting out. So I'll do target files, and we'll do 8-bit for this, leave that there. This is where you can say where do you want the maps to actually go on here. And then this is the document size. So we're going to keep this as 2048 by 2048 for this object because it's not super big. But I'll go ahead and click this. It'll give me the opportunity to go ahead and navigate. And so if I go to that same area that I was exporting things out to, I can come here like this and go here. I'm going to go to my substance folder that I've made. I'm going to make a new folder and call this map output. So it's up to you what you want to call these things. I'm going to select this folder. So now it should spit out all the different maps after it packs them together into this particular spot here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit export, and it'll run through, and it will say exported, finished with some warnings, and you can take a look at that in the log if you want to. I'm going to open the folder and take a look at the maps. So here's the maps that it kicked out for us. And the ones where it packs multiple maps together, that's going to look kind of weird. It's going to look kind of like a rainbow kind of thing, because it's basically packing into the red, green, and blue channel different grayscale maps that are in there. So I'm just going to go and open this with ACDC real quick so you can kind of see what the maps look like. And again, this pixel bleed out here, you can see how it takes the edge of the UV border and pushes it out. That's to keep it to where you don't see any kind of seams on your model, things like that. So here's my color. Here's my normal map that was spit out, that you can see here with the additions that I put on there. And then here is our rainbow colorful map that has multiple things packed into one particular area. So because I know that I need these maps, I'm going to go ahead and copy this location for this. I'm going to go back on over to UE4, and then in the textures area I'm going to go right click and say import to game Canon textures, this area right here. I'll just paste this location in there, and then now I can select this map. I know I output this thing, but I didn't have anything for the emissive area. So let's see here. Yeah, so I've got on this one occlusion. I've got this Canon low res default material occlusion roughness metallic.tga. Let's just go ahead and open these up right here like this. And I could go through and save these. I'm going to go to the color map and just show you that I do not want this sRGB turned on for this one for the color map, and I'll go ahead and save that like this. We'll load up the normal map, and I believe that it's going to automatically flip the green channel for us because it's brought in as a normal map. But if that's not correct, you can always go to this flip green channel. So I believe it recognizes that the normal map is what it is, and so it'll come in correctly like this. So let's turn off this sRGB for this one for these guys, and we'll have to see if these options are correct. So we're going to go ahead and build a new material for this. So let's right click in here and say new material, call it M underscore Canon, and do maybe SP for Substance Painter like this. So I'll double click this and load this in here. I've got my mesh, so I'll go ahead and select this and put it in the teapot area so we can look directly on that actual model while we work. If we hold down L and click and drag, we can move our light source around. And then I need my textures. I'm going to select all these textures and then drag them in over into this area. So now we can open this up a little bit larger so we can see what it is that we're kind of looking at here. I'm going to pick the out of this for the normal and then plug it in here like this, and we can kind of get in kind of close like that, and we can start to see this. Let's take a look at the color, this base color here, and I can see that it's way too white. So what I could do for that, I think what I've got on here, I turned off the sRGB. Let's turn that back on and then save. And then now let's go to our Canon, and I think it should look like it's the right color at that point. And so I'm just forcing it to kind of reload. So everything's looking pretty good on there. This map here, if we go ahead and take a look, let's see what I set up for this thing. So this is occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So I'm going to try based off of what it says. This is the AO, the ambient occlusion. And I could check any of these maps out by, if I do like a multiply node or something like that, and I run this out, I can right click on here and say start previewing node. And so I can see exactly what's been kicked out with this. So this is the AO. If I click and drag this one out, this is the roughness, I believe, and then this one is the metallic. So I'll run this out for metallic, and then this one out for roughness, like this, and I'll get rid of that. And now you can see the options that we've got set on here. And it's looking pretty close to our model that we had in Substance. Now, if you want to tweak any of the values on this thing, kind of overdrive them just a little bit, with the AO, you could potentially use maybe a power node. So we can do power, and then this is going to increase intensity on this thing. So if I do 1 and tap, I can get a value here. I can plug it into this and give it a default value of 2, which is I think the default value for the power node. And then I can right click on this and convert this to a parameter and call this, just call it AO power. AO power, like this. And now I can right click on this thing and say start previewing node, and I can kind of take a look at this. I could do 4 for this, and you can see I'm starting to crank up the values of that thing. So now I can right click, say stop previewing node, and then plug it into the AO. But now I've given myself some way to kind of control the amount of AO that's in this thing. The other thing I could do is if I wanted to do anything, or maybe this texture becomes a little bit dark, I could do a lightning effect. So I could right click and say add, like this, and I could give myself a color. So if I tap 3 and tap, I can get this constant vector 3. If you remember, we can right click on this thing and convert to parameter and call this lighten color, like that. And if I plug this in an add node, if I add black to something, it won't do anything. It won't add any kind of color information or anything else like that. So I basically have the same result of what I had before, but now that I've got a parameter, I've got the ability to go in and say, do I want to add some color and lighten this thing towards a particular color if I want. So I'm going to drag that all the way back down to black and then put it on there. So I've at least got a control for that. If you wanted to organize this, you could click and drag and tap C for a comment, and you could make this and say this is color, and now you can click and drag this thing around like this. So this one we could drag over here and tap C and then call this AO like this in here. Now if I wanted to add a little bit of Finnell to this thing, I could do that as well. I could right click in here and do Finnell, and then I would want to take the normal map and run it to the back of this thing, and then we would need an exponent on this. So I'll tap 1 and then convert this to parameter and call this Fresnel, and then do exponent in like this, and that will give me a value to play with in the material instance right here like this. So I can do something like 5. If we want, we can right click on here and say start previewing node, and we can kind of see what this thing would look like. I do remember about this, about having to do something to the normals on this. So we're going to use a node called tangent to world, transfer normals, not this one. So we actually need to use this node here. We right click and say transform, and it's in the vector ops transform, and we transform the tangent space to world space and plug it into the normals there. At that point, now it's using the combination of the normal map and this here. What we could also do, you can see this base parameter of 5. If we do 20, it gets really thin. So if it's 2, it's a lot larger. So I think 5 works pretty well. Now it doesn't look like it's all that strong currently. So what I could do is we could do a power node again like this, and then we could drag it out of here. We can start previewing the node on here like this, and now you can see it's very either on or off kind of thing at that point. So we might as well make control for that. Hold down one, click and tap, and then we can right click and convert that, and we can call this Finnell power, like this, and then we could plug this into here. So I gave it a value of 2 there, so I can take this one and give it a value of 2 again, and we've got that control built in. If we put it down to 1, it'll give us the results that we had before. So we can do 2, and so what we can do at that point is this. Let's drag this over here like this, and we'll take the results of this and we'll do a multiply. So hold down M and click, and then we'll do this to here. Hold down 3 and click for constant vector 3, and then we'll drag this into here, and then this allows us to use a color that we want as maybe this Finnell kind of effect that is on the outer part. Let's drag this into emissive because this will always be on and we don't have to worry about any kind of lighting. If it's in the dark, this will even show up, things like that. So now you get a control for how thick this thing is, this edge. We've got a control on here for this, where if we put this down to 1, you can see it's going to bleed all over the whole thing, or we can go 2 and get it nice and tight and through there. And basically, we'll probably, after it shows up, you'll probably want to really kind of tone this back to where it's barely not even kind of visible and through there. So it's just maybe does a little bit of edge separation in particular areas. So you could do this and put this over here, tap C, and then call this Finnell. So like this, and we can get this out of the way. Then let's make some extra controls for the roughness. So for roughness, if we want to basically increase the amount of roughness or decrease, I'm sorry, to where it becomes more shiny, we can do a multiply. So let's tap M. So let's take our map that we're using for roughness, and you can see this green channel is being pushed out to here, and we can hold down 1 and tap and then convert that to a parameter. And then we can call this roughness mult. And if we do this, if we multiply that map to something that's black, that's going to make it really dark. So if I start previewing node, this is pure black, which is 0. And if in roughness terms, if something has 0 roughness, it's like glass. So default value, if we put this at 1, we'll get the result back that we have before from the map. Now we have a control where we can, if we want to, we can start pushing this a little bit darker. So if we decrease it anywhere from 1 and start pushing it down, it starts getting darker and darker to the point where we're basically adding this value to it, to where we can increase like how the specularity kind of works within there. So I'll just drag something around here and then tap C, and then we can call this rough like this. And if we get this out here now, the last thing we can do is do something from metallic. Now metallic goes to 0 to 1, and if it's 1, if it's pure 1, then it's purely metallic. So our map is going to be this black and white map, and it's already going to have some values on it. We already saw that. So if we want to push it towards white, we can't multiply it. We want to add something. So let's right click and say add. And let's take, this is the channel that's running out from metallic. We can run this here. And let's hold down 1 and click, right click and convert it to a parameter. And let's call this metallic add, like this. Now if we add 0 to it, it's going to do nothing. It'll give us the same value that we've got in our map, and that's what we kind of want. We just want some controls in there to kind of push it. We can start previewing this. So here's the map that we've got, and if we want to start pushing this whole thing towards white, then we can start giving higher values like this, and it starts pushing it up towards white. So we'll make that 0. We'll stop previewing this node, Let's just go ahead and take this and then tap C for comment and call this metallic. I think I'm missing a T. No, just a L. Like this. So we got metallic, we've got our color, roughness, Finnell, AO, and I think that that should be enough for what we're kind of looking for. Now we could do some special effects, like if you want this to feel like it's glowing out of the end of the cannon, we could do that with the emissive. If we want to keep the Finnell and add some emissive to it, we would need to right click and say add, and then we would need to basically take the result of this and then feed in some new spot for this. But I don't currently have a map for the emissive for this thing. So again, normally if you would take a texture map and then you would multiply it towards some kind of color or something like that within there. Let's see what we got for color on here. So I don't think there's anything. I would have to, again, I have to build a specific map, and then you would take the out of the color, do a multiply, and then you would take the mask. If it was just a black, everything was black on here, and let's say this was white, and then this particular area, then you could multiply this times, do a 3 and tap to get a constant vector 3, right click, we can convert that to a parameter and call this emiss, something like that, and then you would probably want to push it towards, maybe some red color and really kind of crank this up on here. So if I did this and through here and then add it to that and then do the out of this, so if I right click on there and say connect to emissive color, at that point we would start to glow. Now I'm multiplying this red times 0, so that's why there's nothing happening currently. So if I put this at 1 and plug it into this slot, you can see now the whole thing starts to glow at that point. So again, you would just need to replace this 1 with a black and white map, and the white area would be this end of the cannon right in through here like that. So I'll put that back down to 0 like this just to kill everything, and let's just go ahead and save our material. Now after I save the material, here's what I like to do. I like to go back to the mesh that we imported in, and let's double click on it, and let's go ahead and we'll take the material that's on here. Instead of the default material, we can select the new material that we just made, and we can populate it right in here with this. I'll tap F to frame, hold down Alt, and click and drag. I'll tap L and kind of drag around, and we can kind of take a look at what we've built. Everything's looking pretty cool, and it should populate into the world as well. So here's our cannon inside of the world like this. The other thing is, since we got our material and we set up all those controls, we can't have access to them until we take this, we'll right click and create a material instance. And so now we got this mCannon SP instance. Let's go ahead and double click on it. We can open up the different parameters for this. Let me drag this up a little bit. So we can turn all these on to say we want to control all these aspects of this. Again, we can take the mesh, we can go to the teapot area on this right here and fill that. So then that way when we look at our material instance, we can see directly on the material some of those changes that we're making. So we got this here like this, and we'll go ahead and save it. We'll go back to this thing here. Here's our static mesh viewer, and this time instead of filling it with this material, let's fill it with our material instance. So select it, highlight it within there. Let's go ahead and save our mesh, right click and say save on it. So we're just checking to make sure we've saved all of our kind of work. And now we've got this cannon. Here's our material. Let's close these guys up so we don't really need to look at them anymore. And here's our instance like this. And let's try to select this, tap F. Oops, and let me make sure I only have one copy of this. I just wanted to rotate it in the world to where I could see it with the lighting a little better, like this. And I'll kind of zoom in on it. And you can see things do, they might look a little bit different in the world within here. Now I don't have a whole lot set up. I just did that default kind of thing in here. So if we went to lights and put a skylight in here, we could put some fake bounce light and just kind of lighten this up a little bit because it's kind of dark. And I'll change the intensity to 0.15 or maybe 0.25, somewhere in there, just to get a little bit of fake ambient bounce light within there. So now we can kind of play around with this, and we can play around with the AO, this AO power that you see on here. Let's make sure I filled that correctly. It doesn't feel like it's using that material. So I got the instance. Let me save this. Let me select it and make sure I'm populating here, and it is. And let's make sure, because I threw that in the world, I just want to make sure it is using the instance. So it is. Okay, so everything's good. So if everything's working right, we should be able to lighten the color like we built the controls for. If it was too dark, you know, I'm just thinking this would be a slight adjustment in through here like that. We should be able to control the emissive Finnell kind of amount on here. So here's what I find. I might be going through this and taking a look at the work that I've made, and if things are not working correctly or not behaving the way that I expect, or I didn't build some kind of control in there, I need to go back to that original material and tweak it. So here's my Finnell color, and I didn't convert that to a parameter. So I need this to be called Finnell color, like this, and I'll go ahead and save it, and that will automatically populate after I save it to the material instance. Now it'll show up. It needs to be enabled. Now I can change that color on there. So let me hit escape so I don't see that outline on there. And it is showing up a little bit, and if we we want to kind of increase that, we can do that like this. So we're just going to make it more noticeable, and I usually like to overdrive the values on things just to make sure it's like nice and kind of visible. And then we have the Finnell power, and we can kind of drag that down, and you can see it's kind of expanding that, like what we kind of knew what would happen. So I could maybe put that at 1.5, something like that. The Finnell exponent, if I wanted this to kind of grow, I can drag this down like this, or if I want to tighten it up, it was on 5, so I could go even higher, but I think 5 seems to be a good value. And if you want to go back to the default, just right click this and say go back to a default. Here's the AO power, and let's see if I drag that up really high. It doesn't seem to have that much effect on it, which is fine. So this is the roughness multiply. If I drag that down, you can see I can change the roughness, and I can get it to go pretty low there. Don't want to go to a negative value, but if I drag that up, we can do some odd things to the shader too that I don't think you want to do. So again, this would be if I just want it to be a little bit more on here. The metallic add. So let's see, if I drag this up, it's going to get more of this thing towards the metallic, and it really kind of darkens up quite a bit at that point. So that's why, like, if you wanted to crank this up a little bit more, make it feel a little more metallic like this is where this lighten color might help out, where you can kind of lighten it back up just a little bit and through there. and I'll go ahead and hit OK for that. So everything seems to be working. I'll get this back to some of the default values like this. So that at least lets you set up a shader and a material that'll give you some of these extra kind of controls in here like this. I'll go ahead and hit save, and the last thing that we'll do is just run around in here and check this out. And the Canon's to me little bit small, right? So we could take this, and this is something that we probably should have done at an earlier stage, but I'll go ahead and scale this thing up like this and drag out a couple copies. Hold down Alt and click and drag out something like this. And let's go ahead and hit Alt P for play, and then now you can see kind of what we got going on here for this thing. So I think it's looking pretty cool. And so then there is our results for what we got going on for our Canon.